he was elected on the promise to end the wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan and Iraq, which he kind of didn't do. But the thing is, if he has managed to contain the military ambitions of America, then I will at least consider that a job well done, because I think he's kind of been the one digging his heels in and refusing to budge on the issue of going into Iran.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a big Barack Obama fan either, but I'm willing to give him a little bit of credit in that area.
Absolutely. Well, what do you say we yeah, you want to go to
We're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, let's go to a track and come back and let me segue this conversation from the attack on Iran to the idea of global economic collapse and the gold reserves that we have in Canada. Okay, these are interesting topics, and I think the idea of whether or not there will be war in Iran ties directly into this. Okay, so let's go to a track by Health. It's called Triceratops. It's the Acid Girls remix off the self-titled First Health album. Here we go. And that was Triceratops by Health, the Acid Girls remix. How's it going, Mike?
Not too bad.
Cool. Okay, so this is a big topic. And I wanted to lead into it by saying I don't think we go to war unless it's required, unless the world economy requires it. Because I think that we can both agree that the economy is teetering on the brink of collapse. What's happening in Europe, even our prime minister has said in an interview with Peter Mansbridge. Now we're not going to have time to get to that interview, but I did take maybe next week or something. But I did take the clip of Peter Mansbridge and Stephen Harper talking about the impending economic crisis. They would use the word crisis. A lot of other people in the world use the word collapse. Okay, not to be like a doomsayer or anything like that. I'm not saying the sky is falling, but if you see a baby on some railroad tracks and you see a train coming right at the baby, I mean, I think you're right to say, hey, look at that train's about to hit that baby. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, right now there's a train heading towards the baby of the world economy. We see what's happening. Everyone sees it in the news. What's happening in terms of the crisis with the euro. You know, there are countries in Europe with extremely serious debt problems. They're running huge deficits. Their debt to GDP ratio is out of control.
Mm-hmm.
The euro is going to fail one way or the other.
It looks like eventually some of these countries will just choose to go back to their original currency.
Exactly. It's the only reasonable way out, but that's going to be very difficult because it leaves it. What's going to happen is the countries that need to leave the euro to reissue their own currency and deflate their own currency and pay off their debts in a deflated, worthless currency, which is essentially defaulting, right? What's going to happen is we see credit default swaps and other derivative instruments that are designed to insure these bad debts. Okay, so we see a domino effect through the world banking system, and that's not going to leave any country untouched, right? The too big to fail banks in the States have just been asked to do a gamed out scenario. What do you do in the event of collapse, right? And these too big to fail banks are coming back to the Fed and to the IMF and saying, well, we've got negative balance sheets. We have more liabilities than assets. So in the event of collapse, we're insolvent.
Right.
We don't have the money to honor our obligations, right? See, these banks, just like our banks are, heavily leveraged. Canadian banks are no different, right? For example, the Royal Bank of Canada has $6 trillion worth of exposure to the international derivatives market.
Right.
What do you think of that? That's...
in the case of the Canadian banks, that as the government prefers the term liquidity injection, but that the ratio of liquidity injection that the Canadian government put into Canadian banks was equal to the American bailout when you look at it in terms of both countries' GDP and that kind of thing.
Well,
so,
if you compared the amount of the bailout, right, to Canadian banks divided by the market capitalization of those banks, the ratio is higher than that of the big too big to fail banks, what they received in 2008. Now we have done we've done an interview with David McDonald of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and we're going to maybe play that next week because I really want to stick with this subject. Okay.
Right.
So as we know, oil would be really nice to have. It could help us kick the can of the world economy a couple of years down the road. It could help us stave off collapse for a little while. There's nothing like a huge conflagration, a huge war to whip the economy into shape and to silence people too. People tend to think a lot less when in times of war.
Absolutely.
You can count on people's patriotism. But I don't like. Don't get me wrong. I think that the world economy may require war with Iran, but I wouldn't support it regardless.
Right.
I think that what's going to happen is that as soon as the first domino falls in Europe, what you're going to see is the first country inflate its debt away, pay off its debt in worthless fiat currency, right? And then you're going to see other countries have to do that, right? And then the world banking system, there's going to be a domino effect throughout all of that, you know? And we're going to see currencies fail. We're going to see hyperinflation worldwide, as in every country is going to have to, at some point in time, bail out its banks with worthless fiat currencies just to make all the books balance. So, you know what I mean? So no one's gets stuck holding worthless bonds that just can't be paid. They're going to pay They're going to pay debts, and they're going to make obligations good using worthless fiat printed currency. The U.S. Fed is already talking about quantitative easing 3, scheduled for the fall, where they're going to start buying American bonds off the market using printed money. This has had the QE1 and QE2 have already had hugely negative effects worldwide in terms of producing inflation in countries that already have people that can't afford food. So commodities prices like food and energy go up.
So essentially, if what I'm hearing from you, I hear, on one hand, they know the outcome of doing these bailouts and liquidity injections are essentially creating a controlled collapse. And they kind of know what the response is going to be by national governments to some extent, right, then too.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not like just being too scattered or like bouncing all around in this huge issue. But what I'm basically boiling this down to is we're going to see hyperinflation. There's an economic crisis coming. We're going to see hyperinflation. All the governments of the world, all the central banks are going to print money to pay off debts, right? So you remember how in Germany in the 30s you had to carry a wheelbarrow of banknotes?
I remember learning about that.
Yeah. A wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks to go buy a loaf of bread, you know? That's the end result of hyperinflation. And then the next day it takes 2 wheelbarrows full of Deutschmarks to go buy a loaf of bread.
It gets to the point where the money can blow through the streets and people don't even pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens is when all of the countries of the world are loaded down with too much debt, all of the companies, all of the people in the world also are deeply in debt. Everyone's in debt. It's because of the way our currency is created. Our currency is created as debt. And it's just
talking about fiat currencies.
Fiat currency, yeah. Not to get too deeply into that, but the end result of what we see in front of us in terms of an economic crisis is going to be hyperinflation. Money will become worthless, and we will go back to a gold standard. There's no question about that. For as long as we've had an organized society, okay, money has been gold.